businesses need to manage risk proactively. That's my view, and I would always advocate that with any client. And I think it's important to establish engaging with a business as to what their appetite is for managing the risk. And my experience is you get two types of, usually, broadly speaking, people. Some that are really up for it, they want to understand the risk to the business and do something about it. Others are aware of it, but they cross the fingers and hope it will never happen. I always use the analogy, it's like a leaking roof. You don't need a roofer until the roof's leaking, it's too late then. Whereas if you've got a loose slate, at your peril, ignore it. So it's important that businesses do actually proactively manage it. Again, depends on the size of the business, Amanda. So being realistic, if you've got a sole trader, they obviously wouldn't have a crisis management team. They probably wouldn't have a risk register, but we could probably still help them understand what the risks are to the business, either physical and or virtual. There is a crossover now, which we'll probably touch on a little later on cyber examples. So yeah, I think it's really important for managing risk proactively for a business. I think it's crucial. Yeah, I mean, just following that on then from a risk register, we would again advocate a business impact assessment being conducted, and that is really honing in on the business critical functions that need to be maintained for not business as usual, because that's different during a crisis or some form of issue where certain things of the business are offline. It's what must really function for them to trade, for example. So if they're online, solely online, they don't have a shop front, and the internet's taken down for whatever reason, that's a bad day at the office for them. So examining what the risk register looks like, we need to understand why the risks appear on the risk register, and if the risk is aligned to what is a business impact assessment. Now, I can expand on any of this really, Amanda, some of the technical terms, but it's basically a list of things that the businesses need to consider in order of priority. So what's the likelihood of an incident occurring? And then if it was to occur, what would be the impact? And that is an impact assessment. That then helps you put in order of priority what you need to be considering as a priority. I'm preaching to the converted. I know this, Amanda, but it's crucial. It's absolutely central to preparing for a crisis in terms of proactively managing risk and mitigating what might come down the line. And if you don't get your communications right at the start, it can really trip you up. It can set you off on the wrong path, I suppose, around dealing with that. So communications is crucial, and it's also central. Two strands to that. One is the internal focus. So what are you doing internally to look at your staff, and what are you telling them? What are you telling them to do and not to do? And obviously, just as important is external. So what are you telling the wider world? And that's right the way through all of your partners that you're working with, your supply chain, and crucially your customers at the business end. So it is pivotal to effectively dealing with that crisis, getting your communications strategy nailed on early doors, but being flexible. You've got to be flexible and maintain that flexibility to respond. But again, it's in a timely manner, Amanda. I think it's got to be timely. You read all sorts of issues, certainly where there's been a data breach and companies have ignored their obligation to proactively reach out to the Information Commission's office. And I think, they'll take a dim view on that when they perhaps could have been more proactive earlier in reaching out. So that's all, aligned to the communication side of the response. Well, I'll start with an obvious one, Amanda, is they need a plan. And that the plan has got to be aligned to what are the risks that they are, they're worried about. So what's troubling them as a business? Now, what can you safely predict is probably going to happen if the business was subjected to a fire, for example, or a flood, or some form of natural event due to a storm, where there's been storm damage to the property and they're offline for whatever reason. So if we just follow that thread through, again, because we're so reliant now on the digital way of communicating, the digital age, a lot of people's contacts now are now in electronic form. So a lot of contacts are stored on Outlook, for example, and all the providers are available. But if the IT falls over for whatever reason, how are you going to contact the people that you need to contact because they're all on Outlook? You can't get on Outlook. So you need a backup. And the backup is you might store in a go bag or in a paper folder off-site, out of premises, i.e. at home, certainly if you're a director or you're the owner of the business. And that's your fail-safe. So if you can't get into the building for whatever reason, you've at least got something that you can pick up and start working with. So I've gone really tactically there and know around top tip of how to respond, but you need to start with a plan, and that plan has got to be realistic. And aligned to the plan, I would probably encourage any business out there to come up with a list of things that they must do. Let's call it your first 10 actions that you must do the following every single time. And again, that is, you can take some comfort from that, because when you're in a moment of crisis and perhaps a moment of panic, your clarity of thinking and vision, you get blinkered. It comes right down to a couple of things, really. Whereas if you've got a list of things that you must do that you've already prepared, it's a bit more, I think, you're in a safer space to get that response working. Once you've done your list of things that you must do, you can then consider a list of things that you should do. So the must and the should are just as important, but the should's not a priority, and you can push those down. And I always ask this again, Amanda, with clients. So what are your concurrent risks? So the risks that the business was managing prior to this current crisis happening haven't gone away. So what are we going to do about that? So we need to have that, on the list of things to consider as well. I've got 12 takeaways that I would probably encourage people to consider. Some you would say, yeah, that does make sense. It's obvious. Perhaps others you wouldn't have considered. So the first one for me, certainly when you're dealing with a crisis, is strong leadership. If you are an employer of many people, or even a small, medium-sized enterprise business where you've got a few employees, that strong leadership from the get-go is vital. It just sets the tone, sets the pace, and it really does help people recover or deal with the crisis. Second one is invest in the response. So you've got to plan, and I think you've got to learn to deal with the fact that you're going to have to spend some money in the response. And how effective that response will be based on have you invested in it in the first instance. Understand organisational needs. What I mean by that can be both ways. So it's managing expectations, Amanda. So what does the organisation expect from the team? And likewise, what do the team expect back from the organisation or the senior managers? And again, that is central to the communication strategy from an internal focus. We get that wrong, and again, it just trips people up. Fourth one is, it's two parts of this. So your recovery capability versus your defence capability. So what is your ability to recover based on your list of incidents that you've already worked out in order of priority? What's the likelihood of them to happen? What's the probability of them happening? And what is the impact? That is your defence capability versus your recovery capability. And again, you've got to weigh up both sides. Structures and mobilisation, what do I mean by that? And that's what you've got available. So we talk about resilience an awful lot in risk management, or certainly dealing with a crisis. That's individual resilience and resilience of teams. If you and I were part of a response team and we know we're going to be dealing with this crisis for the next 4 or 5 days, there's no point us being at work for 24 hours a day each, because we're going to burn out. We've got to be realistic. So we've got to know our capability, who is available to support us as we look forward. So that's your structures and mobilisation. I've touched briefly on concurrent risks, and we really need to be alive to that. And I use the phrase very, very supportively, I think, is take the blinkers off. If we're focusing solely on one issue, it's what else is occurring that might come and bite us. We need to be aware of that. This next one's an important one for me. Single points of failure. We see it time and time again. A single point of failure in your response, or even just your day-to-day running of a business. It might be an individual process, or it might be an individual person. Well, what happens if that person isn't there? Things start to grind to a halt very quickly. So let's identify single points of failure and let's deal with that. Let's spread that risk if we can. Governance is the next one for me. Governance is not a stick that drives a donkey, but does the governance process, does it enable or does it disable? So, again, it comes back to the culture of an organization. Is there a blame culture in there that perhaps would stifle conversations, or are they actually receptive and open to ideas and suggestions? And instead of looking or pointing the finger, we accept that, we could probably learn from this quickly. Let's get the team in and share that. So that's a good one for me. Certainly from an IT perspective, let's look at spreading the risk across the platforms. That would be my next sort of takeaway, really. And then we're not over reliant on one or two technical issues or technical solutions, should I say. Should they go offline, then again, we're stuck. This one's important. Power of partnerships. And what I mean by that is don't be afraid to ask for help. In the time of a crisis, and there are lots of organisations and people that can help. So pick up the phone. That would be a top tip for me. And if you've got a critical friend, or you've got the ability to reach out to the likes of yourself, or even the guys at Portent, we can help. So pick up the phone. This one probably should have come a bit further up the list, really, Amanda. But be honest with customers. That's absolutely important. If you're looking at your reputational issues around your brand and your ability to maintain, I suppose, that confidence in the customer in buying your product, then you've got to be honest with them. And again, that is going to be crucial from a communication side, or getting the strategy right with your customers and your supply chain, distribution network, etc., etc. And finally, learn and adapt. That would be my final takeaway, really. If we don't learn anything from dealing with that crisis, then we can expect we're going to be in the same position again if we're likely to encounter the same issues again. So learning and adapting. I think debriefing a crisis once we come out the other side is probably just as important as preparing for it in the first place. That would be my final takeaway, Matt.